Greetings, weary traveler. Tonight, I assume the role of your storyteller, prepared to gently guide you into a state of deep and undisturbed repose. Before we embark on this journey, kindly remember to express your support for this presentation by giving it a like and subscribing for a diverse collection of forthcoming narratives designed for bedtime. Please feel free to indicate in the comment section below your present viewing coordinates and the current time in your location. Should there exist a specific account you desire to be narrated in subsequent episodes, I would be most pleased to receive your suggestion. Story 1. I had invested a considerable number of months in the meticulous preparation of this wilderness journey. It represented a long-standing pledge I had made to myself over many years, offering a chance to extricate myself from the formidable pressures of everyday existence. I deeply longed for a reprieve from the ceaseless ringing of my cellular device, the unending torrent of professional correspondence, and the relentless clamor of city sounds that invariably occupied my mental landscape. My only comrades on this venture were to be myself. Several days immersed in the expansive Alaskan backcountry and the profound stillness my father frequently mentioned throughout my formative years. My father had been brought up in a minute logging community situated in close proximity to the Kenai Peninsula. He consistently regaled my early childhood with captivating stories of waterways so extraordinarily translucent that one could effortlessly discern every distinct marking on the back of a trout, of majestic mountain ranges that appeared to have been meticulously crafted like painted masterpieces, and of skies of such immense grandeur that they evoked an overwhelming sensation of triviality, rendering one feeling akin to an insignificant insect. He would often impart this invaluable insight. Out in the untamed wilderness, my son, you truly come to understand your own essence. I had always harbored a profound yearning to grasp the deeper significance of his pronouncements. Consequently, when the burdens of life began to exert their weighty influence upon me, specifically an unfulfilling, stagnant career, a romantic relationship that had irretrievably deteriorated, and the myriad concurrent challenges, I ultimately resolved to undertake this venture. I acquired the requisite gear, retrieved and meticulously readied my venerable sleeping shelter, and with careful consideration packed my Smith & Wesson 10mm firearm, acutely conscious that the intricate philosophical contemplations of humankind hold no sway over the primal instincts of a formidable bear. Subsequently, I journeyed northward by means of air travel. The pre-planned route was straightforward and entirely uncomplicated. 3 nights were designated to be spent along the Susitna River basin. The selected position was not excessively isolated, merely a short distance removed from some well-worn ATV trails, perhaps a mile or two separated from any other pre-established campsite. It was adequately far to cultivate a deep sense of absolute solitude, yet sufficiently close to ensure that, in the event of unforeseen difficulties, I would not find myself utterly abandoned. The inaugural day unfolded without a single flaw. The atmosphere was astonishingly pure, so impeccably clean that its biting crispness felt almost searing upon inhalation into my lungs. It possessed a refreshing coldness that stimulated rather than causing discomfort. I undertook a trek of approximately 3 miles, eventually discovering a suitable expanse of level ground near a meandering bend in the river, where I meticulously set up my temporary shelter beneath the sheltering branches of 2 towering spruce trees. The surrounding panorama was beyond any form of criticism. Distant mountains gracefully outlined the horizon, and the river flowing downstream emitted a gentle, continuous murmur. I dedicated numerous hours to the laborious endeavor of attempting to catch fish, employing the precise techniques my father had painstakingly taught me. He frequently asserted that the Susitna teemed with grayling. However, either his recollections were imprecise, or the aquatic creatures had long since departed the vicinity, as I failed to provoke even a single bite, not even one. It was precisely at this juncture that I observed the initial peculiar irregularity. The fish, the sparse few specimens I could discern within the deeper pools, simultaneously commenced to thrash with remarkable intensity. Their movements were not characteristic of a unified darting in a single direction, as if startled by the presence of a predator. Rather, they dispersed in every conceivable trajectory, as though an electrified conductor had been submerged within the water. A pair of them even propelled themselves vertically into the ambient air, striking the water's surface again with a sharp, resonant impact that distinctly echoed through the surrounding arboreal landscape. Then, with an abruptness mirroring their initial agitation, they reverted to complete stillness, merely drifting as if nothing out of the ordinary had transpired. I remained motionless, still grasping my fishing rod, pondering, that is undeniably abnormal. Yet I dismissed the peculiar incident. Perhaps a predatory creature had navigated through the underlying current. Or perhaps I simply lacked the intimate comprehension of this specific river that my father had possessed. By the declining hours of the afternoon, I succeeded in procuring 2 small fish, an adequate quantity for my evening sustenance. Content with this modest catch, I proceeded further upstream, meticulously surveying the surrounding environment, capturing numerous photographs and deeply inhaling the pervasive quietude. Except it was not truly quiet. There was an omnipresent low-frequency humming sound, faint and distant, reminiscent of the sound produced by a wasp nest situated far within the dense foliage. Upon my initial detection of this sound, I initially attributed it to an internal physiological phenomenon, perhaps a ringing in my ears or some similar auditory illusion. However, it subsequently recurred, a gentle hum, then silence. Approximately 5 minutes later, it reappeared once more. I meticulously scanned the entire valley, half expecting to glimpse someone traversing the distant terrain on an off-road motorcycle. There was nothing, not a single living entity. As the sun began to set, the sound gradually diminished, and I ultimately dismissed it from my conscious thought. I returned to my designated campsite, prepared the captured fish, meticulously stuffing them with rich butter and pungent garlic, and grilled them over the flickering open fire. It was, without question, the most utterly delectable meal I had consumed in many months. The river emitted a soft, sibilant sound in the encroaching darkness, and for the first time in a significant period, I experienced a profound sense of utter contentment. This feeling of tranquility persisted until my return journey from the tree line. I became rigidly immobile halfway back to my camp. Across the river, just beyond the obscuring shadows cast by the dense spruce trees, a palpable presence moved. It was a slow, deliberate movement, a discernible shape gracefully slipping between the trees like dissipating smoke. "Hello." My voice unexpectedly fractured and projected with greater volume than I had intended. The form offered no reply. It did not even exhibit the slightest tremor. I advanced a few steps to my left, attempting to glimpse around the obstructing tree trunks. Nothing. A tight knot of apprehension formed in my stomach. Perhaps I had merely envisioned it. Perhaps it was an elk or an optical illusion caused by shadows or any other innocuous entity. Yet I could not dislodge the pervasive sensation of being intently observed. I continued my progress, accelerating my pace. My boots produced an amplified crunching sound on the frosty ground, and every auditory perception seemed magnified tenfold. Upon reaching my camp, I constructed the fire to a height greater than was strictly necessary. I remained seated, my gaze fixed on the flickering flames with my firearm resting across my lap, incessantly reiterating to myself that my apprehension was entirely baseless. Eventually, the fire dwindled to mere embers. I zipped myself securely inside my tent, a robust model meticulously crafted from thick canvas and providing sufficient vertical space to stand upright. I remained acutely attentive to the myriad sounds of the surrounding woodland for an extended duration before the embrace of sleep finally claimed me. I was abruptly roused by an intense illumination, not the gentle warmth of sunlight, but a piercing white, frigid, and so intensely luminous that it effortlessly penetrated my closed eyelids. My immediate thought was of a powerful flashlight. That individual I had briefly glimpsed earlier. Perhaps he had tracked my movements. I instinctively seized my pistol, my heart pounding violently within my chest. I cautiously unzipped the tent flap. Nothing. The campsite remained utterly still. The fire was entirely extinguished, leaving only a faint, dull orange luminescence within the fire pit. The trees loomed, stark black and utterly silent. Then I perceived it. It was not situated on the ground, but suspended above it. A flawless vertical column of light hung suspended in the air, strikingly resembling a divine spotlight. It poured directly from the expansive sky onto the trees approximately 15 feet from my tent. There was no accompanying sound whatsoever, no discernible wind, merely that unwavering beam, solid and stark white, illuminating the tree trunks with an almost sterile luminescence. My throat became parched, and my intellect struggled vehemently to formulate a rational explanation. A helicopter, a drone, perhaps an optical trick of the aurora borealis. But none of these hypotheses aligned with the observable phenomena. There was no characteristic rotor chop, no engine hum, only an oppressive silence so profoundly deep that it exerted physical pressure against my skull. Then, with equal suddenness, it entirely vanished. One moment it was undeniably present, the next absolute impenetrable darkness. I remained utterly paralyzed, the gun trembling uncontrollably in my grasp. I contemplated entering my truck and precipitously departing the area, but the road was a treacherous expanse composed of mud and gnarled roots, and I was deeply uncertain of my ability to navigate it safely in the pervasive darkness. It was at that precise moment that the light reappeared directly above my tent. The formidable beam enveloped everything in a blinding white. Shadows dispersed like flowing water. I recoiled abruptly, momentarily blinded, and that was when I again perceived the buzzing sound. This time it was not faint. It was piercingly loud, an auditory assault that set my teeth on edge. I bolted, seizing only my jacket, boots, and firearm. Nothing else. I tore frantically into the tree line, branches savagely lashing my face, my lungs burning with arduous exertion. Behind me, the light swung like a formidable sword, cleaving through the dense forest canopy. It relentlessly pursued me. I am unable to precisely ascertain the exact distance I ran, perhaps half a mile or even a full mile. The terrain began to ascend, and I laboriously clawed my way up a rocky incline toward a desiccated oak tree clinging precariously to the hillside. I painstakingly pulled myself into its branches, abrading my palms until they were raw, and pressed myself flat against the rough trunk. The entire forest was illuminated by an eerie white glow. The beam swept through the clearing below, moving with a seamless, searching motion. As it passed over my campsite, I observed that the flap of my tent hung open, resembling an exposed wound. The light lingered there for an agonizingly protracted minute before gradually shifting its trajectory toward the hill. I held my breath. My hands, still clutching the firearm, felt entirely numb. The buzzing intensified progressively, reaching an unbearable crescendo until I felt as though my skull would literally fracture. Then absolute silence. The light abruptly extinguished. Darkness as dense as ink poured back in. I remained sequestered within that tree until the first light of dawn, shivering uncontrollably, my teeth audibly grinding together. Every minute sound of cracking bark seemed to portend approaching footsteps. On one occasion, may God assist me, I distinctly heard a voice, my own voice. "Hello," it whispered, soft, almost playfully inflected, seemingly floating upward from the profound blackness like an alluring lure. I ascended higher, pressing my face against the rough bark, and remained utterly motionless. When the initial faint smear of gray daylight touched the distant ridge, I frantically scrambled down and fled. I did not cease my desperate flight until I reached my camp. Everything remained intact: my truck, my equipment, even the fish bones by the extinguished fire. I packed my belongings in less than 5 minutes. My tires furiously churned mud as I sped down that rugged trail, incessantly checking my rear-view mirror as if anticipating something might emerge from the surrounding trees. 2 miles subsequent, I passed another campsite. A family waved, their faces alight with smiles, as if the world were entirely normal. I felt an impulse to stop, to inquire if they had witnessed the strange occurrence, but what coherent explanation could I offer? I simply continued driving. I recounted the events to my father later. He listened intently, his brow furrowed, and posited that it might have been military training operations. However, his voice lacked any true conviction. Years elapsed. I never uncovered a definitive answer. Yet on certain nights when the city is hushed and my thoughts involuntarily drift back to that piercing beam, I hear it once more. That low, resonant, angry, buzzing swelling ominously in the surrounding darkness, and I am left to ponder whether whatever entity resided within those woods still retains a memory of me. Story 2. I had never contemplated a return to Glacier Point, not subsequent to the catastrophic incidents that had befallen my family in this very locality. Some individuals assert that Alaska possesses an enduring memory, that the snow may conceal secrets, but it never truly eradicates them. Perhaps this adage holds truth, for upon my arrival in town after an absence spanning 12 years, the very first spectacle that greeted my vision was that particular dwelling, the one that had been the subject of hushed murmurs and veiled whispers throughout the late 1990s. It persisted there, prominently situated on Denali Avenue, majestically perched on the hillside, strikingly reminiscent of a monarch observing his subjects. The external deck was exceptionally voluminous, a multi-tiered architectural monstrosity that enveloped the uppermost floor, and at its pinnacle, a hot tub was ensconced like a veritable crown. During my formative years, it was almost regarded as a tourist attraction. Individuals would deliberately decelerate their vehicles on the thoroughfare below, solely to gaze upon its sheer grandeur. It was utterly impossible to overlook. Its lights blazed resplendently at night, and its music thumped with such intense bass that it caused window panes in homes located 3 blocks away to audibly vibrate. My uncle frequently indicated it as we drove past, remarking, "That's where the true decisions are forged, not in Juneau, not in DC, but right there within that damned hot tub." I used to laugh, convinced he was merely jesting. It transpired that he was not. I had been present in the town for less than 2 hours before the specters of the past began to re-emerge. I had paused at a service station near Moulin to refuel my vehicle and procure a hot coffee when a voice from directly behind me uttered, "Never imagined I'd lay eyes on a Lindstrom again in these parts." I became rigidly tense. The Lindstrom surname carried considerable weight here, predominantly of a negative connotation. I turned and observed Hank McKenney leaning against his mud-encrusted Silverado pickup truck. He was the identical individual who had once distributed candy to me when I was merely 5 years old, now exhibiting graying hair at his temples and an intensified bitterness. "Hank," I uttered, forcing a semblance of a smile. It's been a protracted period. Far too long, he responded, his eyes narrowing. Are you here concerning your mother's dwelling? Yes, I affirmed, just clearing it out. He regarded me for a prolonged moment, then lowered his voice significantly. You are to maintain a considerable distance from Denali Avenue, do you comprehend? Nothing resides up there but phantoms and individuals who stubbornly refuse to confess their transgressions. I desired to dismiss his ominous warning with a casual laugh, but an inexplicable element in his tone caused a solid knot to form in my stomach. The house perpetually manifested itself in people's conversations, embedded within incomplete sentences and in the abrupt cessation of discussions whenever I probed too extensively. My mother had passed away 3 months prior, succumbing to cancer. I should have returned sooner, but I found myself unable to confront the painful associated memories. She had tragically succumbed to alcoholism after my father's unexplained disappearance in 2004. There was no note, no discernible trace. Law enforcement officials surmised he had most likely fallen through river ice or had been mauled by a bear during one of his numerous hunting excursions. But my Uncle Ray vehemently rejected that explanation. So did I. By the third day, the incessant whispers began to erode my composure. Each time I ventured into town for provisions, someone would invariably inquire if I had yet visited the house, always employing that same suggestive intonation. Ultimately, I yielded to the pervasive curiosity. Denali Avenue had undergone minimal alteration. Imposing spruce trees bowed heavily under accumulations of pristine snow. The house loomed ominously at the culmination of the cul-de-sac. Its paint was severely faded, its windows shrouded in oppressive darkness. The deck, now weathered, exhibited splintering boards. The hot tub was drained and cracked, yet the fundamental vestiges of its extravagant past conspicuously remained. I parked a block away and proceeded the remaining distance on foot. My boots crunched audibly on the icy surface. My breath manifested as visible plumes in the frigid air. The closer I approached, the more profound the silence became. There exists a particular type of quietude in Alaska that causes your ears to reverberate, as though the world itself is holding its very breath. The gate was secured by a chain, but the chain hung loosely, giving the impression that it was locked when it was in fact easily opened. I pushed it ajar and cautiously advanced up the driveway. Broken beer bottles shimmered beneath the snow. A fox darted from the dense bushes and vanished into the tree line. The front door was slightly ajar. I admonished myself to retreat, yet an inexplicable, more powerful force compelled me to enter. The initial sensation was the odor, mold, stale alcohol, and a metallic scent akin to aged copper pennies. Internally, the house had been completely stripped, its furnishings removed, and the wallpaper was visibly peeling like desiccated skin. However, on the floor proximate to the fireplace, someone had incised words deeply into the wood. They never left. My heart rate accelerated. I instinctively captured a photograph with my mobile phone, though I cannot precisely articulate why. Perhaps it was for substantiation. It was then that I detected the distinct creaking of the floorboards upstairs. I froze. Hello? My voice sounded diminutive, almost childlike. No response, merely another creak followed by an oppressive silence. I retreated slowly, my heart thumping violently, and did not cease until I was safely back inside my truck. Throughout the entire drive home, I could not dispel the unsettling sensation that someone had been observing me from those darkened windows. That evening, I telephoned Uncle Ray. He resided in Kenai, now operating a bait shop. When he answered, his voice was gravelly and laced with the remnants of whiskey. "You went up there, didn't you?" he inquired. I hesitated. "How did you know?" "Because you sound precisely as your old man did after he started probing around," he responded. My stomach sank. "Ray, what precisely happened to Dad?" I pressed. A prolonged silence ensued. "Do you genuinely wish to know?" he asked. "Yes," I insisted. "Do you recall Peak Industries Group?" I did. It was a colossal corporate entity that dominated extensive operations across half of the North Slope in its prime, ultimately collapsing in the early 2000s. "They owned that house," Ray explained, "or rather the individuals who managed it did. It commenced as a venue for revelry, poker games, illicit substances, and escorts, flown in from Seattle. But after a certain duration, that ceased to be sufficient. They began to bring in local girls, exceedingly young girls. My mouth became dry. "Jesus," I whispered. "They would ensnare them with narcotics, retaining them there for weeks. Some were runaways, others were not. That hot tub, deals were brokered within its confines that dictated the outcomes of elections. Judges, senators, corporate executives, you name it. All of them sat their asses in that tub." "Why did no one intervene?" I whispered. "Because every person who possessed the authority to intervene was implicated." My hands trembled so violently that I nearly dropped the phone. "What about Dad?" I demanded. Another protracted silence. Then Ray stated he discovered the truth, acquired irrefutable proof, and declared his intention to expose it comprehensively. 2 weeks thereafter, he vanished. Law enforcement labeled it an accident. I classify it as a cover-up. Sleep became an utter impossibility after that disturbing revelation. I sat at my mother's kitchen table, accompanied by a bottle of Jack Daniels and my father's venerable lockbox. Inside were fragments of a life, hunting permits, sales receipts, and one singular item that sent a chilling sensation through my veins. A Polaroid photograph. It depicted the deck of that very house, its lights blazing, the hot tub effervescing, and steam ascending into the frigid night air. 4 men were seated around it, cigars clutched firmly in their hands. I recognized one of them, Senator Gerald Haskins, who had recently been a prominent figure in the news concerning a significant environmental bill. At the periphery of the frame stood a young girl, perhaps 16 years of age. Her eyes conveyed an unsettling emptiness. Inscribed on the reverse side in my father's distinct handwriting were 3 succinct words: "They own everything." That was the precise moment I comprehended a horrifying truth. If they had murdered my father for this crucial information, what unspeakable actions would they perpetrate against me? The following day, a black sport utility vehicle began to make its appearance outside my mother's residence. It was perpetually parked across the street, its engine continuously running. The driver was invariably a different individual, yet their eyes consistently held the same chillingly lifeless gaze. Then the telephone calls commenced. There was no voice on the other end, merely the disquieting sound of breathing. By the 5th such call, I was trembling with such intensity that I inadvertently dropped the phone. I packed a bag, fully intending to depart. However, as I stepped outside, an envelope lay conspicuously on the hood of my truck. Contained within was another photograph, an image of me standing at the gate of that house the preceding day. Inscribed on its reverse side were the words, "Stop digging." I should have departed immediately then. I did not. Instead, I returned to the house, driven by an imperative need to uncover the complete truth for my father, for my mother, and for every young woman who had vanished and never returned home. Inside, the air felt perceptibly denser, as though the very walls harbored secrets too grotesque to willingly relinquish. I ascended the creaking staircase to the uppermost floor. Snow filtered through an aperture in the roof, lightly dusting the carpet. Down the corridor, a locked door obstructed my path. I forcefully kicked it open. The room exuded an oppressive stench of decay. In a corner, a mattress, darkly stained, lay on the floor with chains bolted to the adjacent wall, and on the floor, scattered haphazardly like desiccated leaves, were identification cards, dozens of them. The faces of young women smiled up at me from beneath layers of accumulated dust. My stomach churned violently. I stumbled backward, and at that precise moment, I heard the distinct crunch of tires outside. I rushed to the window, a black SUV, its doors opening, revealing men clad in heavy coats. I bolted down the stairs, through the rear door, and into the surrounding trees, the snow reaching my knees, my lungs burning with arduous exertion. Behind me, voices shouted, and lights sliced through the encroaching darkness. I did not cease my desperate flight, not when the gunshots reverberated through the trees, not when something searingly hot grazed my arm, not until the forest utterly enveloped me. That transpired 2 months ago. I have been in hiding ever since, continuously moving from one town to another. Each time I entertain the notion that I have successfully eluded them, a new SUV materializes in my rear view mirror. I still possess the Polaroid. I contemplated approaching the press, but then I commenced compiling a roster of every individual connected to that house. Judges, senators, corporate executives, the chief of police. They were not prevaricating when they asserted that they control everything. Therefore, should you be reading this and I am no longer present, disregard the official headlines. If they declare I incurred insurmountable debt or wrapped my truck around a tree or perished from exposure on the tundra, understand this. They murdered me just as they murdered my father, and the house on Denali Avenue, it perpetually remains, awaiting the next young woman, the next lifeless form, the next dreadful secret to enter beneath the snow. Story 3. I never imagined that my entire existence would become inextricably linked to a mere sheet of frozen water in a desolate expanse. If you have not had the profound experience of traversing Alaska's North Slope during the absolute depths of winter, permit me to meticulously delineate the scene. It is akin to standing at the very precipice of the world, yet possessing an augmented sense of fragility, an intensified obscurity, and an unparalleled degree of solitude. Dismiss the idyllic, picturesque snow globe imagery, often depicted on commercial postcards. In this unforgiving realm, the snow does not shimmer with gentle light. It suffocates. The sky is not a gentle gray hue. It is a vast, abyssal void. And the cold, it does not merely bite with a sharp chill. It utterly consumes. I was 28 years of age when I commenced my employment in the northern regions, pursuing the significantly lucrative earnings in the oil fields that were the subject of pervasive whispers. The unvarnished truth is that the remuneration is substantial, but every single cent is acquired through arduous effort, copious perspiration, and the gradual erosion of one's fundamental mental faculties. Our particular operation specialized in performing intricate rock analysis for exploratory drilling ventures. Conceptually, it appeared remarkably uncomplicated. Subsequent to a drilling crew completing a designated pad, we would arrive, scrutinize core samples, and diligently furnish our findings. Sounds straightforward, does it not? Yet these pads were consistently situated amidst some of the most unforgiving terrain on the entire planet. To access them, one was compelled to navigate ice roads, transient roadways meticulously carved from the permafrost of the perpetually frozen tundra. These were tenuous lifelines stretching precariously across an untamed wilderness, capable of terminating one's life within a mere 60 minutes should a single misstep occur. This specific assignment transpired in mid-January, signifying the period of polar night, a 6-week stretch entirely devoid of any sunrise whatsoever. Imagine awakening into pervasive darkness, executing your professional duties in impenetrable darkness, and retiring to bed in ceaseless darkness. After a certain duration, the concept of time itself unequivocally loses its tangible quality. Individuals jest about experiencing night shift brain. In this extreme environment, it is considerably more severe. It is as though your physiological being completely relinquishes the very memory of daylight. Our designated site, identified as well 6 to 17, was positioned approximately 70 miles west of our primary base camp, within a settlement I shall refer to as Drift Station. The completion of the requisite tests consumed nearly a full week. By the conclusion, we were verging on mental instability due to the pervasive boredom and the perpetual black sky. I could discern an intrinsic, restless urge beneath my skin to escape, to inhale air untainted by the ubiquitous scent of diesel and despair. When we finally completed the loading of the company pickup truck to commence our return journey, the time was 4:10 a.m. However, the precise hour held no actual significance. The sun had not graced this land with its presence for an entire month. The ambient temperature hovered around minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, with the wind chill further depressing it to even lower extremes. My crew on that particular night consisted of Derek, 34 years old, my most intimate companion in that isolated environment, loud, heavily bearded, the kind of person who would laugh at his own crude jests, merely to fill the oppressive silence. Mike, a fresh-faced youth, barely 22 years of age, embarking on his inaugural work hitch. He still harbored the naive belief that adventure constituted a beneficial aspect of the job, not a form of protracted suffering. And Ray, in his mid-40s, a former military man, stoic to an extreme. It was perpetually ambiguous whether he was engaging in humor or on the verge of inflicting harm upon someone. We completed our checkout procedure with the pad guard, then cautiously ventured onto the ice road. The stipulated speed limit was 25 miles per hour, and for very good reason. Exceeding this velocity risked fracturing the fragile surface, inevitably leading to an irretrievable catastrophe. I was partially dozing in the rear seat, until Derek uttered something that abruptly jolted me into full wakefulness. What the? I leaned forward. Ahead, our headlights carved two distinct cones of illumination into the profound blackness, and precisely in the center of that powerful beam stood a man methodically walking directly down the middle of the road. He wore no heavy parka, no insulated boots, no protective gloves, merely jeans, sneakers, and a thin gray hoodie. For a fleeting moment, my brain recoiled, stubbornly refusing to process the glaring anomaly. The temperature was minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, and this individual was attired as if for a casual late-night errand to a local convenience store. Mike squinted. "Is that a hunter in sneakers?" Derek emitted a strained laugh, but the sound was profoundly unsettling. Ray leaned forward, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "Slow down." Derek gradually reduced his speed. We advanced closer, the tires producing a distinct crunching sound on the ice. The man exhibited no reaction whatsoever. He did not even cast a glance in our direction. He simply continued to shuffle forward, his head bowed, his arms hanging limply at his sides. His clothing was remarkably dry, an absolute impossibility in such extreme meteorological conditions. I lowered my window and the biting cold assailed my lungs like a physical blow. "Hey!" My voice faltered slightly. "Are you all right? Do you require a ride?" Silence. "Sir," I inquired, this time with greater volume. Still no response. Mike chuckled nervously. "Perhaps he's deaf. Perhaps he's deceased," Ray muttered. I desired to make a jest, but something about the man's particular gait deterred me. He was not staggering as if intoxicated or severely afflicted by frostbite. His steps were unswerving, purposefully directed, strikingly resembling those of an individual with an ingrained, specific destination. And then I detected it. Even through the merciless wind, I caught a distinct aroma, a pungent, acrid stench that seared my nostrils, like vinegar intermingled with rust. My stomach churned violently. "Jesus," Derek exclaimed, wrinkling his nose. "Do you perceive that?" I nodded, utterly unable to articulate words. Mike, bless his utterly naive soul, decided to extend his upper body out of the window. "Hey man, are you disoriented or something?" No reaction. Then Mike performed the most foolish action I had ever witnessed. He reached out. Before I could utter a warning shout, the man spun with astonishing swiftness. One instant, he was an indistinct gray blur in our headlights. The next, his hand abruptly extended and clamped onto Mike's arm with unimaginable, inhuman solidity. Mike screamed a guttural, primal sound that propelled my heart into my throat. The man's face abruptly materialized into view mere inches from mine through the open window. It was not pale nor afflicted by frostbite. It was simply devoid of expression until his eyes fixed upon mine. Then they were no longer empty. They blazed, not with the warmth of fire, but with the infernal intensity of molten hatred, a rage so utterly pure it felt sentient. And then he shrieked, "God, help me!" That sound, I am absolutely certain, will haunt me until my dying day. It transcended human vocalization. It defied animalistic classification. It was something primordial, a shriek violently torn from a throat that should not, by all natural laws, possibly exist. It drilled through bone and burrowed relentlessly into my skull. I yelled for Derek to accelerate. He violently depressed the gas pedal. Tires spun, gained traction, and propelled us forward. Yet the man maintained his vice-like grip. He ran in tandem with us. His sneakers slapped rhythmically against the ice, maintaining pace with a 6,000-pound truck, accelerating at 25 miles per hour. One hand remained clamped onto Mike's arm. The other clawed desperately at the vehicle door. Mike's screams devolved into anguished sobs. "He's going to take me! He's going to—" Ray lunged across the seat, encircling Mike's waist with both arms. "Hold on!" The truck's cabin transformed into a chaotic battleground. Mike thrashed violently. Ray exerted himself to pull him back. Derek hurled expletives, and I desperately attempted to shove the door closed as the entity wrenched it wider. And throughout this entire ordeal, that unholy shriek persisted. Then, as abruptly as it had commenced, it released its hold. The resultant force propelled Mike forcefully into Ray. The door slammed shut. I contorted myself in my seat, my heart jackhammering just in time to perceive nothing. An empty road, an empty void of blackness, as though he had never even been present. We remained in utter silence for the subsequent 30 miles. Not a single utterance, only the persistent hum of the tires and the muted sighs of the heater. Mike continued to sob quietly, clutching his arm as though it were the last remaining vestige of his very being. Upon reaching the guard shack, Derek almost wrenched the steering wheel from its mount as he pulled the truck in. The guard, a lean individual named Neil, opened the door, a smirk gracing his features. "What? You boys hit a—" His words abruptly ceased as Mike stumbled out, his sleeve pushed up to reveal a perfectly blackened handprint encompassing his bicep. Neil's face became completely devoid of color. He radioed in the disturbing incident, officially logging it. Protocol mandated a thorough search. They meticulously scoured that road for 12 hours, but discovered absolutely nothing. No man, no discernible tracks, no drag marks. Neil chuckled nervously when we later inquired, "Hell of a prank, boys, I suppose I'll reciprocate." We offered no argument. Mike departed for home the following day and never returned. Derek and I endured 2 more work hitches. After that, the pervasive silence on those roads became unbearable. And occasionally, late at night, I can still perceive that chilling shriek, discern that acrid stench, and I am left to ponder, if it was not a man, then what, in the name of all that is holy, was it? Story 4. I never truly believed that a seemingly straightforward wilderness excursion would engrave itself indelibly into the very fabric of my memory. It was conceived as an ultimate escape, consisting solely of myself, Tom, and Jesse. Every spring, with unwavering punctuality, we would meticulously clear our personal schedules and venture northward into the vast and untamed Alaskan backcountry. No telephones, no internet connectivity, no incessant demands from overbearing supervisors. Merely us, the encompassing woods, and a sufficient quantity of potent whiskey to momentarily obliterate the awareness of our impending occupational obligations. That particular year, Tom meticulously selected the location. It was situated 30 miles from any discernible main road, near a constricted creek bottom, densely choked with towering spruce and thick alder trees. It was an idyllic spot, profoundly remote, exceptionally quiet, the kind of place where the silence itself felt like a living, breathing entity. The journey inward was protracted and arduous, a 2-hour crawl over deeply rutted dirt and thick, clinging mud that caused every single bone in one's body to ache. My venerable Chevy groaned in protest, as though it harbored a deep animosity toward us. Yet it successfully transported us to our designated destination. Upon our disembarkation, the air enveloped me, clean, sharp, and sufficiently frigid to cause a distinct tingling sensation in my nose. I inhaled deeply and mused, God, this is true liberation. We dedicated the entire morning to establishing our camp. 2 substantial canvas tents positioned facing each other, of the variety featuring external poles that exceeded the weight a single individual should reasonably transport. Between them, we meticulously strung a colossal green tarp, ingeniously utilizing saplings we had cut, and resilient white nylon trot line. That tarp served as our essential lifeline. Above the designated fire pit, we cleverly rigged an overhang, allowing smoke to dissipate while simultaneously preventing rain from dousing the flames. Tom was a meticulous perfectionist, pacing about diligently tightening every line. Jesse merely chuckled, operating at a noticeably slower pace than either of us. You're constructing a veritable stronghold, he quipped, tossing me a package of nails. By noon, the encampment presented a commendable appearance, taut, robust, and impeccably prepared to withstand a week of inclement weather. Our primary objective was uncomplicated: hunt, prepare meals, consume spirits, and diligently reiterate the cycle. That morning, we traversed the creek bed in pursuit of squirrels. The woods were profoundly silent, save for the occasional chattering sound emanating from above. We managed to procure a few plump specimens, an adequate quantity for our evening repast. The experience felt profoundly gratifying, my boots sinking into the soft moss, the reassuring warmth of the shotgun cradled in my hands, the earthy aroma of damp soil rising with each crouch to retrieve a kill. Upon our return, ominous clouds were visibly gathering from the west. These were colossal, dark, and menacing formations that advanced with remarkable celerity. I vividly recall Tom standing there, his gaze fixed upon the distant horizon. That's not merely a light shower, he muttered. He was undeniably correct. By 3 p.m., the wind had acquired a biting intensity. By 4 p.m., the initial drops of rain were descending, heavy and bitterly cold. We scrambled frantically, tightening guide ropes and pulling our equipment under cover. Jesse cursed vociferously when the wind violently tore his poncho from him, rendering it a mere tattered plastic bag, and then it struck. Rain descended like an immense waterfall, pounding with such formidable force that visibility extended no more than 10 feet. Thunder rolled low, resonating deep within one's chest. Lightning flashes were sufficiently brilliant to momentarily illuminate the entire forest in a stark white light. We huddled together beneath the tarp, soaked yet feeling secure. The fire blazed merrily, coffee percolated aromatically, and the squirrels were skewered on a spit that Jesse meticulously turned by hand. The savory aroma of roasting meat permeated the damp air, intermingling with the earthy fragrance of wood smoke. We laughed, exchanging trivial anecdotes, feeling like absolute sovereigns of the untamed wilderness. "City boys roughing it," Jesse jested, leaning closer to the comforting fire. Tom grinned, pouring additional coffee. This is the essence of life. It was until it abruptly ceased to be. It transpired with such bewildering swiftness that I remain utterly incapable of coherently reconstructing the exact sequence of events. One moment it was solely us, the crackling fire, the drumming rain beyond the tarp. The next, a distinct shape emerged from the very midst of the storm. There was no shout, no audible crunch of boots on the wet ground. He was simply, inexplicably present. He approached from our right, seamlessly slipping between my tent and the tarp. Water streamed profusely from his camouflage jacket. In his hands, clutched across his chest, was a rifle. Every faculty within me became instantly paralyzed. My intellect lagged a full second behind my visual perception. Then I moved with furious intensity. The chair overturned beneath me as I frantically scrambled for my shotgun, which rested against a sapling. Tom emitted a strangled exclamation, stumbling backward. "Jesse, good God!" He pitched forward directly into the fire. Flames hissed. Fabric ignited. His scream, a raw, piercing sound, tore through the raging storm. He rapidly rolled out of the flames, but his hands were already blistering. The acrid odor of scorched flesh assailed me like a physical blow to the gut. Throughout the entire chaotic scene, the man merely stood there. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, easy!" His voice cracked like a whip. The rifle was not aimed directly at us. Its bolt was pulled back, clearly indicating no round was chambered. He held it with the casual demeanor of a man carrying a shovel, both hands across his body. Yet this detail held no mitigating significance. An armed stranger had infiltrated our camp without uttering a single sound, and fear transforms every minute detail into a potential catalyst for profound alarm. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I gripped the shotgun, my heart pounding so vehemently that it entirely drowned out the sound of the storm. Tom partially raised his 870, his eyes wide with terror. Jesse was on his knees, whimpering, smoke still curling ominously from his sleeves. "I'm lost," the man shouted again with increased volume. "That's all just lost." For a moment, none of us moved. Story 2. The world seemed to constrict, focusing solely on the firelight, the sibilant hiss of the rain, and three men fixedly staring at a stranger who should not have been present. And then I perceived his face. A tall individual, perhaps 6 feet 2 inches in height, thoroughly drenched. A cheap camouflage jacket clung to his frame, but his grin, that was the feature that utterly petrified me. It stretched from ear to ear, excessively wide, unnaturally bright, as though someone had forcibly peeled open his face and affixed it in that grotesque manner, and his eyes, pale blue and unnervingly unblinking, even as rain streamed into them. I swear to God, he did not blink once, I recall. "Just lost," he reiterated now in a softer, almost gentle tone. Something about his entire demeanor caused my skin to crawl. It was not merely the grotesque grin, It was his profound stillness. He did not fidget, did not shift his weight, did not even glance at the fire or the tents. He simply stood there smiling, his eyes locked onto mine, as if he were meticulously scrutinizing something concealed deep within my consciousness. The others did not appear to notice, or perhaps they were too terror-stricken to care. We had little alternative. To abandon him in the midst of that tempest felt morally reprehensible, even though every innate instinct screamed otherwise. "The trucks are this way," I finally articulated. My voice sounded foreign to me. He nodded once. The unsettling grin remained unchanged. We traversed half a mile through clinging mud and dripping trees. The storm had somewhat abated, but everything was thoroughly saturated, the ground slick and treacherous. No one spoke. The only discernible sounds were the squelching of our boots and the dripping of rain from the branches. Each time I glanced backward, his eyes were fixed upon me, wide, unwavering, as though he required no visual guidance for his footsteps, as if he were meticulously studying me. We reached the truck. He ascended into it without uttering a word, water visibly pooling on the seat. The combined odors of wet earth and something else, something sour, permeated the cab. "Where is your vehicle?" I inquired. He gestured toward the old pipeline road. "Half a mile," he stated. We drove in silence. The windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically back and forth, the sole sound interrupting the oppressive quiet. Upon arriving at his car, an antiquated blue sedan positioned at an awkward angle within the brush. A profound chill settled in my stomach. There were no fresh tracks, not in that pervasive mud, not anywhere. He opened the door, rifle still in hand, paused, and looked back at me with that same impossibly fixed grin. "Appreciate it," he stated. Then he closed the door and remained standing there as we drove away, smiling in the persistent rain until the enveloping trees obscured him from view. We did not engage in conversation on the return journey. We did not jest, nor did we laugh. The fire was extinguished upon our return, and none of us felt inclined to rekindle it. That night, I lay within my tent, listening to the incessant drip of rain from the tarp. Every shadow seemed to harbor a potential menace. Sleep remained elusive, and here lies the undeniable truth that I cannot dispel. If he was genuinely disoriented, how did he manage to locate us without leaving even a single trace? And what precisely was he smiling about? Story 5. I never would have conceived that a seemingly routine drive after my working hours could transmute into the single most terrifying night of my entire life. When I first arrived in Anchorage, Alaska, for a week-long training excursion, the possibility of encountering any form of danger was the furthest concept from my mind. My corporate entity had meticulously arranged for my travel to conduct a series of internal audits at a modest branch office. It marked my inaugural visit this far north, and every distinct aspect of the state utterly captivated me. The seemingly endless expanses of majestic mountains, the crisp, invigoratingly salty air, and the unique manner in which the clouds appeared to hang lower than any place I had ever previously experienced. By the third day, my professional duties had progressed seamlessly, and with the sun lingering low on the horizon, yet stubbornly refusing to fully set, I resolved to maximize my enjoyment of the evening. I rented a vehicle, a dilapidated silver Subaru with a prominently cracked windshield and an air freshener shaped like a moose, and set out onto the open road. I had no preconceived itinerary, merely a vague notion of heading northward toward the coast. Alaska in the late summer is an unparalleled experience. The daylight persists, bathing everything in an almost surreal golden luminescence. I lowered the car windows, allowing the cool, fresh air to enter along with the faint, comforting scent of spruce. My music playlist shuffled between classic rock anthems and serene acoustic compositions, and for the first time in many weeks, I experienced a profound sense of absolute tranquility. Approximately 40 minutes outside the city, I observed a small pullout marked by a weathered wooden sign that proudly proclaimed Harper's Point Beach Access. The parking area was utterly deserted, save for a few gulls hopping erratically and the occasional discarded beer cans strewn near the tree line. "Perfect," I murmured under my breath as I maneuvered my vehicle into the designated lot. I parked near the edge, retrieved my jacket from the rear seat, and followed the narrow descending trail towards the beach. The pathway was steep and exuded a faint aroma of salt and decomposing seaweed. At the bottom, the panorama unfolded into a scene strikingly reminiscent of a meticulously crafted painting, a broad rocky shoreline adorned with tide pools shimmering in the diminishing light, seabirds gracefully gliding low over the water, their distinctive cries echoing in the prevailing stillness. It was truly perfect. I extracted my mobile phone and captured a few images, then returned it to my pocket. For a period, I simply walked, nimbly hopping from rock to rock, occasionally crouching to observe tiny crabs scuttling actively within the tidal pools. The vast ocean stretched infinitely before me, forming the kind of expansive horizon that instills a gratifying sense of one's own smallness. And then the distinct sound of tires on gravel. The noise drifted downward from the parking lot above. Initially, I barely registered it. Vehicles arrive and depart. That is entirely normal. However, something about the manner in which the engine revved, loud and aggressively, compelled me to glance upward toward the bluff. A dark pickup truck had just pulled in, its headlights briefly sweeping the entire lot before being abruptly extinguished. From my vantage point, I could only discern the roof of the vehicle. The engine idled for a moment, then roared as the truck executed a tight circular maneuver, raising a conspicuous plume of dust. The tires screeched piercingly, their sound reverberating along the empty stretch of beach. And then the truck abruptly departed, retracing its path. "Okay," I uttered under my breath, attempting to dismiss the incident with a light laugh. Probably just some local adolescents engaging in frivolous behavior. I shook off the uneasy feeling and resumed my exploration, yet a disquieting, prickling sensation had begun to creep relentlessly up my spine. Every few seconds, I found myself involuntarily glancing back toward the parking lot. It remained utterly deserted, the trees above swaying gently in the subtle breeze. 15 minutes later, the sound returned. I became rigidly immobile mid-stride as the identical truck, black, equipped with large tires and featuring a lifted suspension, rolled back into the lot. This time it did not execute circular maneuvers. It pulled up near the very edge of the bluff and simply remained there. I could now clearly discern its outline, starkly silhouetted against the encroaching, dusky sky. Its headlights remained off, but the engine hummed, a low, ominous growl that carried distinctly to my position. "All right," I muttered, endeavoring to maintain my composure. "You possess every right to be here just as I do." Yet, it did not feel that way. I commenced my return journey toward the trail, maintaining a casual pace. Initially, my boots produced soft, crunching sounds on the sand and shells. The incline proved to be steeper than I recalled, bordered by dense spruce and alder trees. Halfway up, I heard the truck peel out once more, tires screeching, gravel spitting. It did not depart, it merely circled. Then the sound gradually faded southward toward the main road. A wave of relief washed over me. Perhaps they were simply bored and seeking fleeting amusement. I pushed through the final few steps to the summit of the trail, then froze. The lot was empty. No truck, no sound. Merely my Subaru resting alone beneath a sky that had deepened into a bruised, purplish hue. I slowly exhaled, unlocked my car, and ascended inside. My hands trembled slightly as I forcefully inserted the key into the ignition. It was at that precise moment that headlights abruptly illuminated behind me. The roar of that truck's engine materialized from nowhere, and in my rear-view mirror, I observed it hurtling down the road I had just traversed at full velocity, rapidly closing the distance. My stomach plummeted. The truck swung into the lot, skidding sideways, its grille facing directly toward my vehicle. My breath caught in my throat as the driver abruptly killed the engine, plunging everything into an oppressive silence. The windows were tinted a deep black. I could discern absolutely nothing within. My pulse hammered ferociously in my ears. Every instinct screamed, "Do not move. Do not exit the vehicle." Then came two distinct slams. Slam, slam, doors. My heart lurched into my throat. I could perceive footsteps crunching on the gravel, slow and deliberate, approaching from behind my car. Then a voice, deep and masculine, delivered in a casual tone that sent shivers down my spine. "Hey," I offered no response. My hands clenched the steering wheel with such force that my knuckles ached. "Hey, you down there?" Another voice, now more distant, called toward the trail. My stomach transformed into a block of ice. They evidently presumed I was still on the beach. I ducked low, extinguished my car lights, and listened intently. Footsteps again, moving toward the bluff, then sliding down the trail. I heard them laugh softly to each other, their voices carrying distinctly in the pervasive stillness. "She's got to be down there." "Yeah, I told you I saw her go that way," one of them asserted. One of them uttered something else, muffled by the increasing distance. And then I heard it, the distinct clink of metal against metal, a lengthy object being adjusted in someone's hands, a gun, a bat. I did not wait to ascertain its nature. Maintaining as low a posture as possible, I cautiously cracked open the door and slipped out. The parking lot stretched empty, the truck looming like a menacing shadow beside my Subaru. My every movement felt deafeningly loud. The subtle click of the door, the soft crunch of leaves beneath my boots. I crouched and bolted toward the tree line on the opposing side of the lot. My heart jackhammered in my chest. The woods enveloped me in mere seconds, branches whipping violently at my face, roots aggressively grasping at my ankles. Behind me, I heard them calling again, their voices now sharper and more urgent. "Hey, where did you go?" I ran blindly, my lungs burning, until I discovered a fallen spruce tree sufficiently large to provide concealment. I impacted the ground forcefully, biting back a gasp. My entire body trembled as I pressed myself into the damp earth, desperately attempting to regulate my breathing. The woods were unnervingly quiet, then the distinct crunch of boots on leaves steadily drawing closer. I clamped a hand over my mouth, my eyes wide with terror as I observed a figure pass between the trees. A man clad in a dark jacket holding something long and heavy in one hand. He scanned the beach below, then commenced moving back uphill. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. My mobile phone buzzed faintly in my pocket. A single bar of service flickered intermittently. I could not summon assistance. I could not risk the telltale light. Finally, after an eternity, the footsteps faded. I waited until my muscles screamed in protest before moving. When I did not stop. I circled widely, maintaining a deep presence within the trees, until I reached the road approximately half a mile north. My legs felt like jelly, my throat raw from the exertion of my breathing, but I harbored no concern. I extended my thumb and successfully flagged down the first vehicle headlights I observed. It was a couple in a rusty recreational vehicle who refrained from asking any questions when I implored, "Please just get me out of here." I never returned for that Subaru. Law enforcement officials located it the following day. Its tires were slashed and its windows shattered. They never apprehended the men in the truck. But this much I know. With absolute certainty, they were not present to extend a friendly greeting. And if I had not heeded that singular primal instinct to conceal myself, you would not be reading this narrative right now.